our market. I know some of these numbers you may have at the ready, but just think of, for a minute, how staggering some of these statistics are as we look at them one at a time here. 2012 is the year, that's just next year, that Morgan Stanley predicts that smartphone shipments globally will exceed those of PCs of all types. Laptops, netbooks, desktops. Now, we've already seen the first quarter where that has happened. That actually happened last year, the last quarter, where that phenomenon happened. But next year is the year when the entire year, smartphones will finally reach that tipping point. Now, for those of us in this room, in a developed market like the US, where every one of you probably has a smartphone sitting on your hip right now, that may not be that staggering to you. But when you consider that feature phones across the world in emerging countries still dwarf smartphones, and when you consider that that tipping point places smartphones in a cost category that make them affordable for emerging markets, you have markets like Brazil, where Pyramid is now estimating that this could be the year when Brazil sees its first sub-US $100 smartphone enter the market. That changes the game. It makes communications truly global, and it allows mobile technology to go into emerging markets, affecting GDP, affecting growth in the same way that we've been able to enjoy it here in this market. 14 million are the number of developers worldwide right now. These are developers that are creating the next software masterpiece. Please set your watches for the next 8 minutes, because in the next 8 minutes, another developer will be, quote-unquote, born here in North America in this market. And I come from the space with the service provider being my preliminary background. I started in this industry, born and raised on the service provider side, and that's where most of my experience has been. And I can remember painful debates back in the late 90s when DSL was first being rolled out, where we sat in agony saying, what is the killer app? Why would anybody want faster internet access? Because let's face it, the killer app back then was email. And we thought if we could just get people to download fatter email attachments, boy, we'd be in business. Little did we know what kinds of killer apps would be developed with the likes of YouTube, Facebook. None of those came from a service provider. And as I consult with service providers all the time, I say, you know, the game around you has now changed. And you are either going to place a bet on the table that says that you're looking for the next killer app with your limited resources. At the same time, 14 million minds and counting are looking for the same. You are either going to be part of the value chain with them, or you are going to be potentially disintermediated by them. The choice is yours, but I don't really bet in Vegas, and I'm not taking those odds. 1 to 14 million seems like a pretty risky bet. 7%, I won't ask this. I asked this of an audience earlier, and I got nobody raising their hand, and I thought, probably nobody wants to admit. 7%, according to Consumer Reports, is how many households they expect will cut the cord this year on video. Now, I bet if you guys were truthful, you'd see a couple of hands go up in this room of some that have already made that choice. The actual number is closer to 1 to 2%. And I don't know how many of you saw the Sandvine report that was recently issued a week or so ago, but Netflix alone now constitutes 30% of the traffic consumed during peak periods. By itself, it now exceeds traffic consumed by BitTorrent. And while that is a staggering statistic on its own, what is more staggering is that if I were giving this keynote just 7 months ago, that number was 20%. So in 7 months, Netflix has grown 50% in its volume, now constituting 30% of the traffic during peak periods. When you add Hulu and YouTube and other video streaming services in the mix, they represent about 50% of the traffic consumed, estimated to grow